Hello everybody, Roger here again. It's been a while since my last video, but I'm planning to get back into the swing of things here and get more creative as the new year rolls in here. It's mid to late January, and we're in our winter here on the coast of BC, believe it or not. It doesn't seem that way. It's a nice sunny day and I'm gonna be going on a hike. I'm currently out here at Rauhala, my family's heritage farm. And if you go over there in the distance, you see over there towards that far point, I'm going to be hiking out past Rauhala, going out that way and going to a site called Mures. So follow along and I'll talk to you more about what Mures is and who Mures is and the history of Mures. All right, so let's go hike out towards Mures. And as you can see, it's a beautiful winter day out here at Rauhala as we're looking out across Rauhalati, the Bay of Peace. I'm not going to be hiking the beach. I'm going to head on out to the other side of Rauhala, over to the farm side, and talk more once I get over there. So let's go over to the farm. And I'm over here at Rauhala. You see the friendly cow, Curly, the friendly cow is coming, and our friendly deer, and our two resident roosters coming to say hello, looking for some feed. The deer eats the scraps whenever we leave behind. Anyways, I better go and get the cow her food. Over here. There you go. Hello. Hello. Yeah. Hello. You gonna come for some feed? Yeah, you gonna come too? Yeah, you can. You could come eat too. Yeah. Yeah, you could come eat too. Hello. All right, so to tell the story of who Mure was, his real name was Henrik Mure, and it said he was a bookbinder, and this goes back to the time of the Colvin Cancer. And the story begins out here at Rauhala during the time of the Colvin Cancer, which was between 1901 and 1905. That was during the time of the Finnish settlers here on Malkosaari, Malcolm Island, who founded the town of Sointula. I being fourth generation from those original Finnish settlers. Now, back in those days, Rauhala belonged to the Colvin Cancer, and after the fall of the Colvin Cancer in 1905, all the lands on Malkosaari, Malcolm Island went back to the government. In and around 1907 is when the lands were crown granted to people, and a lot of the Finns that stayed behind, who made and built and continued on the town of Sointula, my ancestors being one of them, then were crown granted the lands on Malkosaari, Malcolm Island. Now Rauhala is now two separate properties, but has only been subdivided once. And during the time of the Colvin Cancer, it was intended to be where the ICA newsletter was going to be printed from. I got a piece of hay sticking in my beard. Anyways, so the ICA newsletter was the first Finnish language newsletter printed in Canada, and it was printed right here in Sointula. And the Rauhala farmhouse, which is right over here, was intended to be where the ICA newsletter was going to be printed out of. And this building here was built in 1904, and it's one of the last standing Colvin Cancer buildings on Malkosaari, Malcolm Island. We renewed the roof back in 2018. So of course that's not the original roof. And the original paint of the house, as you can see way up there, it's got this yellow trim and white. And the most important buildings on the island, or in Finnish traditions, were painted with yellow and white. Usually it was a higher class people that had houses that were yellow and white. But also buildings that were meant to be of significant importance were painted yellow and white. So the original FO Hall colors were yellow and white as well. All right, I'm gonna take a hike here and begin my hike out to Mures. I'm still at Rauhala on the eastern edge of Rauhala, and I'm gonna be walking down the hill to where the horse and buggy trail begins. Now, there were at one time 6 homesteaders, and they were bachelors who lived out past Rauhala. And I don't know the names of all of them. I know Kalle Salo, who you've probably heard in one of my previous videos, was one of the people who homesteaded past Rauhala when he first came to Malkosaari, Malcolm Island, and settled here. He is actually one of the people where the properties past Rauhala was crown granted to. Now, I'm following along here, along the edge of our waterfront at Rauhala. This is all part of a horse and buggy trail. And Kalle Salo is said to have had a horse named Peggy, and he used to go along this horse and buggy trail going all the way out to Cleva Road and gathering up firewood back in the old days, and had this cart that was pulled behind this horse named Peggy. So we're following the horse and buggy trail for a while we're going to be following the horse and buggy trail pretty much the whole way out to Mures, because it goes all the way out past Rauhala, connecting these old homesteads that are now reclaimed by the forest. But before I go along the horse and buggy trail, I'm going to veer off into the woods here along our border at Rauhala and show you an interesting feature. This was once an old wooden gillnet drum, and back in the 1930s the gillnet drum was invented here in Sointula by the Jarvis family, and this is an original gillnet drum. And it's just returning to the forest, and in the area where the gillnet drum is at Rauhala, the base and the root of this old tree here is an old East Hope engine. One of those engines that were like putt, 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 putt kind of engines from an old boat very long time ago. And here is an old winch, because way back in the day on this site at Rauhala there was an old boathouse a long time ago. Here we are. Now this is an old coal mining borehole for testing to see the grade of coal in the area. Back in 1906 this was put here. And it goes down 100 meters. And I'm told it would have took an entire season back then to dig this hole. And I do have the records of this, and I did make a video all about this, and it's on my YouTube channel. So if you wanted to look into it, you could look it up. It's called The Ocean is Boiling, But Why? I think. Or at least that's what the thumbnail says, so you should be able to find it. Now we're going to carry on and go down the horse and buggy trail. You can still see the horse and buggy trail going along here, even though there's a lot of windfalls falling along. I usually go in the spring and do winter maintenance down these trails. I haven't for a couple seasons now, but I will eventually be going through here and cleaning it up a bit to make it a little bit easier to walk through here, because I do in the spring and summer give history tours of Rauhala. So if you're interested in that, follow along my video series and I'll tell you how you could come along on one of my tours. So if you can't, this is a good way to see some of these sites for yourself and learn the history, is following along my video series. All along here, it's hard to see on video, I know, but this is all flat area in here. And it was once a logging camp. And it was the Malcolm Island Logging Company, which later became Pioneer Timber Company and moved over to Port McNeill. And as the logging camp grew, it became the town site of Port McNeill. So this was all a logging camp at one time. And down in amongst the forest floor, you could see remnants of some of that old logging equipment. Now, a long time ago, there was a fire, about 1936, and that's an important date, so keep that in mind as we go along out to Mures. And the logging camp, all this flat area here, there were camp houses at one point in time. And that logging camp burnt down. But as we're going through here, you'll see remnants of the old cat that was used in the logging. Here, down on the forest floor, being reclaimed by the forest. You can see here the tractor tread. And going up here is the cat road. Now, I'm not going to be going up the cat road today. It is off of the property of Rauhala, but it veers back onto Rauhala a little ways up here. And I'm going to make a whole other video just on the cat road. But not today. Today we are going down to Mures. So let's carry on following the horse and buggy trail, past Rauhala, past the cat road, all the way out to Mures. So let's go. So now as you're following the horse and buggy trail past the cat road, we're now in an OGMA, which is a acronym for Old Growth Management Area. And you're going to see some old growth trees. These ones here I call the twins, and they're a couple red cedars, and they're beautiful trees. This is an interesting feature going along the horse and buggy trail. It was fallen a very long time ago, and someone was making shakes from this log very, 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 very long time ago, possibly going back to the time when the Finnish settlement was here. And this set of trees are another set of old growth cedars, and I call them the Three Sisters. As you can see, there's three of them together. And I'm walking along the old horse and buggy trail known as Peggy's Trail, going past Rauhala. And here we have what could be a possible CMT, or culturally modified tree. A bark stripping that could have happened a long time ago. Again, this is just a possibility. As down below here you could see there is a strip or a branch that's down. If you look way up there, it could have been from maybe a storm or something, knocked a big chunk of this tree down and stripped it. And the living part of the tree is the layer just underneath the bark, cambium area. And so that's a living part of the tree. So when you strip that off, the part that's stripped off from the tree dies, and then the tree starts growing around it. So It's possible that this is bark stripping, however, it could also just be natural. I've been out this way multiple times. I know where I'm going, I know what I'm doing, but even then, accidents can happen, so it's a good thing to let someone know where you're at if you're going for a hike in a remote part of the forest where there is no other people. It's very, very, very rare that you'll find anybody out this way. And it is in the middle of our winter, even though, as you can see, it's a beautiful day and quite warm out. It is still winter, and you can get hurt. I wouldn't say you could get lost anymore on Malkosaari, but you can get hurt. So it's best to be prepared. Now, looking off to the side here, you could see this is an old fish box from an old fishing boat. A long time ago it was put here, probably washed up on the beach. And even though it's a nice sunny day for a hike, it does have a bit of a cool breeze, and as the day goes on, it's going to get colder. When we have clear skies up here, it tends to freeze at night, and it was a frosty morning this morning. You can't tell right now, it's midday and the sun has melted all the frost as I'm walking along the old horse and buggy trail here. Now, the natives didn't live on Malkosaari, Malcolm Island. There was actually a legend that they thought this island arose from the ocean and was returning to the ocean. They thought it was sinking. So back in the day, they thought the Finns were crazy for building a town on this island that was going to sink. But over yonder there on Vancouver Island, over towards those mountains there, is the Nimkish River, and at the mouth of the Nimkish River they once had a little village, and then from there they would come over here and get some food like clams on the local clam beaches, and take some of the trees to build canoes and bark stripping and such. Now I'm coming up to the remnants of what was an old draft dodger cabin. So back in the 1960s, Americans that wanted to avoid going to war came and hid out in remote regions of Canada. So they came back here in the 1960s and built themselves a cabin. And this is the remnants of one of those cabins. And Malkosaari, Malcolm Island is an old ice age formation. So as the last ice age was coming to an end, this was all giant glaciers, this island, and it's all mostly glacial till. And you'll see these giant ice age erratics here and there all over strew the island, even in the forests. And when I go up in the upper portions of Rauhala up in our forest, you'll see some erratics that I'll take you to in a future video. So again, I'm walking through one of the last old growth forests on Malkosaari, Malcolm Island. It's a somewhat protected OGMA, old growth management area. And even though these trees aren't as impressive as you'd think an old growth forest would be, as you go along, you will see the occasional giant tree. See the occasional bottle or artifact lying around. And I tend to leave these things where they lie. Go up into the woods here a little bit because I want to show you another CMT in one of the larger cedar trees in this OGMA. As I'm approaching here, these two lovely cedars, you'll see this big guy here. There's a little bit of a bark strip taken off here. And as you look up, there's a hole right in the middle of that tree. from a knot. And if we go along around the other side of the tree here, you'll see it's been hollowed out. And so this was probably either a natural strip of the tree that died or a bark stripping. And when the tree died, the natives lit a fire at the base of the trunk of the tree here to hollow it out in the hopes to make a canoe out of this tree. This was a practice they would do, but as you can see, it burnt right through the knot and they couldn't use it. So that's one of the reasons why this tree is still here. Now you're wondering, probably wondering anyways, why is this tree still alive if it was burnt here and hollowed out? Well, that's because, again, the living part of the tree is just under the bark. And that's why the tree grows out in rings, because the outer layer of the tree is what's alive. The inside is dead. Going along the horse and buggy trail here, and pretty soon you're going to notice the forest transitions from the OGMA into an old farm. You're going to notice the transition because the trees are going to change and it's going to open up into more what looks like it was at one time a field, because it was a field a very long time ago. And we're getting closer to the edge of Mures here. So pretty soon you're going to see that transition I was talking about. You can kind of see, well, I could see anyways, I hope the camera could see it too, but the beginnings of the field that once was. You could see this old tree. It was a windfall, but probably Mures, if not Salo or someone else, took some shakes off of this, possibly to build a house or a shed or a sauna out here one time, a long time ago. And here we come up to the edge of Mures. And here we are. This is Mures, which was once an old homestead past Rauhala, connected by Peggy's trail, Peggy's horse and buggy trail. That went, you can see Peggy's trail there going along the beach out towards Rauhala. And this is the site of Mures. This was all once an old field. And you can see the trees are smaller, mostly alder and hemlock. And I'm coming up to something really cool here, a really neat feature that I'm going to show you. Just up ahead here. All right. So, camera never does this justice because you can never really capture it as you can see it with your own eyes. But right here in front of me is a big mound, a C-shaped mound, and it's built from rocks off the beach. And you can see here, it goes around, comes up. Here I'm standing on top of the mound now, and has a couple arms reaching down towards the beach here, and a bit of a gap down here. And now what this was the basement or root cellar or foundation of the old house here, Mure's house, where Henrik Mure once lived. And again, he was a bookbinder, and he lived out here past Rauhala to be closer to Rauhala, where the Ica newsletter was going to be printed. And it's hard to see, like I said. I wish I had a drone or something. It'd be kind of neat to get some drone footage here. But right here is an old mound where the house was. Now, I've found records stating when this house burnt down. And it burnt down in 1936. So remember, I said to remember that date because there was a fire at the old logging camp that was out past Rauhala at that same time. So I'm just going to walk up onto this mound just so you guys get a better idea of it here. And I don't like to disturb anything here. I like to leave things where they lie. Looking back at the mound, you could see where the mouth opened up, the doorway down to the basement or root cellar area here. And the house would have originally sat on top of this mound. I'm just going to climb back up here onto the mound and walk around over here. And you could see this ditch, and this ditch goes all the way up here and up and around. Hand dug ditches, no different than the ones out at Rauhala. Again, I made a video of this on my YouTube channel about the ditch digging project that happened out at Rauhala back in the 1930s. This, however, predates that. And down here, unfortunately, a tree fell a few years back and kind of buried it, but right down in here is a well. Right there, this pit here was an old well. Here we got some deer droppings. So there's a deer in the area. These are fairly fresh, recent. And usually it's the doe that'll leave those little droppings, like little chocolate coated raisins. So what I have before me here are some photocopies of some crown grants. And the first one here is of Rauhala. And it was crown granted again to a man named Emil Takla back in 1907. And he was here during the time of the Calvin Cancer, but not much is known about him. Next one over, going east from Rauhala, which borders Rauhala and is in and around where the coal mining shaft is. It was crown granted again in 1907 to a man named George W. Jafares. And I know nothing about him. I don't know if he lived here or not. I don't think he did, but he may have had something to do with the coal mining operation that was going to take place in the area. And then the next one over is Kali Salo, and this was crown granted to Kali Salo in around 1907 as well. And this is where the site of Mures is on what was Kali Salo's property. So Kali Salo was the original owner of the property, and I don't know the history of when or what went on and why Mures lived here, what was going on back in those days. But eventually in 1929, Mures died, and it said that all the homesteaders that lived past here, which were all bachelors, died of illness, and Kali Salo was the last one out here. And he got lonely and he moved in closer to town, about halfway actually between town and Rauhala, on what is the old Salo farm where the Kaliva Creek is, or Ilimon and Puro, which I also explore in another video. And he had a farm out that way. Now, Oscar Walsh, I know nothing about him, but he would be the next property over past Rauhala. And if you were to look at this map that my grandfather drew here, the property of Oscar Walsh's would be this one right in here. And you could see here is something that was there, and it was probably a steam donkey because there was some logging operation that went on in that area. And it says it was logged by Campbell. Now, I don't know much about that, but this is an interesting map because it tells who was logging in the area as well. Now, this here is a copy of an old map that my grandfather, Mikko Potu, later known as Michael Polton, drew, and he drew a lot of maps on the island. And this here is Rauhala. And at the time this map was drawn, it was already subdivided in two. But back in the day, this would have been Malkosaari, and it was crown granted to Malkosaari in 1907. And then going past Rauhala, you could see over here is the site where Henrik Mure once lived, where we're at right now. And you could see he drew some of the buildings that were once here at one time. And you could see the house. We could get in here a little closer and it stays not so blurry. I'll use a stick or something to point at it. But you could see the house and the well right here. And this is the ditch going around the property. But there's also some other structures here, and unfortunately it doesn't say what they were. So I'm just going to follow up here along this ditch. Just go explore a little bit in the Mures homestead site. I don't get out here very often. I do give tours, history tours, that I do in the spring and summer. So again, if you want to come along on one of my history tours, get in touch on my Facebook page, Rauhala Farm on Facebook. You could look it up and get in contact with me there, and I'll take you on a tour of Rauhala. Now there's another neat feature up in this area that I want to point out, and it's along the hillside here, out at Mures. And you could see there was a pathway going up along the hill here, and you could find some artifacts hidden in the woods here. And I don't like to show too many of these off because I don't want them to get stolen. So I like to take people out here on tours myself. This one says McClary Manufacturing, Toronto, Winnipeg, Vancouver. Looks like it's some sort of a stove part. But because of people wanting to loot little things like that, I'd rather bring people out here to share the history and talk about the history than have people come out here and do looting. Thankfully, Rauhala is like a barrier that prevents a lot of people from coming out here. Again, it's one of the more remote parts of the island, so it's kept it safe over the years. But it is a fragile, historic site, and we have to be respectful. If you come out here visiting on your own, please leave things where they lie. Now, this is the feature that I wanted to show. You can see it looks like a cement stack of some sort, like a smokestack here. Now, back in those days, you would only make something very important out of cement, especially way out here. So I'm not sure what this was. It's very doubtful that this was a sauna. It could possibly have been a forge, because he did have a horse. Malkosaari did have a horse. And you would probably need a horse if you wanted to live all the way out here, way back in those days. So it could have been a forge. But up in here, you can see there's a cement wall or division here, and a dugout into the hillside. So it was probably a forge way back in the day. Another neat feature I want to show you guys before I start heading back to Rauhala and leave Mures behind. And it's just a little bit past Mures. So let's go check it out. See all through here where it was once all an open field. I'm not sure what Mures farmed back in those days, but it was a farm reclaimed by the forest. So we're going to carry along the horse and buggy trail. Again, there was at one time 6 homesteaders past here, 6 bachelors, and they all started dying of an illness. And Malkosaari was the last one out here. So I'm following the horse and buggy trail again. Now I'm passing Mures. I just want to note that when I was a kid growing up here in Sointula, my parents would, usually at the end of summer, we'd all take a hike all past Mures and It was an annual pilgrimage we would do growing up to come out here at least once a year. And then later on, in later years, and even during my childhood, we would come out here hunting in the fall, because just up above me there is this ridge or hillside, and down below that ridge is all nice and flat area. So it is a really nice area for settlement and farming here going past Rauhala. But I want to show you guys a neat feature going back to the time when I used to come out here with my family growing up in Sointula. From that Crown Grant I showed you just past the Crown Grant where Cauley Sallow had and Mure's site was. It belonged to a man named Oscar Walsh, and I'm not sure anything about him. It was Crown granted to him in 1907. But up in this area here is part of an old logging skid where they would pull the logs out of the forest, and it would have been Campbell logging. So that little structure would have been down in this area here closer to the beach, and was probably a steam donkey. But what I want to show you lies amongst these trees here, and it's very special. So again, my family used to come out here as an annual pilgrimage and see Mures, and my dad would tell us about Mures. And back in 1981, the year I was born, my dad, Davy Langfist, my mother, Nancy Langfist, my sister, Cindy, my sister, Lorena, and her friend, Heather, and then down below, down here, me, Roger. My dad carved this in the tree when I was a newborn baby. I was born in August, so it would have been at the end of August, beginning of September, probably before all the kids went to school. They came out here in 1981. My dad carved our names in this tree. On our annual hiking trip in here back in 2001, unfortunately, it was carved a little too deep into the tree. But in 2001, we came here with my mother, Nancy Langfist, Roger Langfist, my niece, Jasmine Langfist, and my niece, Melody Langfist, in 2001 in the same tree. And over on this tree here in 2011, we tend to come out here every 10 years to sign our name in the tree. That's been the tradition. So in 2011, just before I went to Alberta to go into the oil fields, we came out here again, Roger Langfist, my mother, Nancy Langfist, my sister, Lorena, and her husband at the time, Mike Williams, and their youngest daughter, Silkins Williams. And then just a few years ago, in 2021, we came out here again on my sister's birthday, on 2021. And my mother, Nancy, my sister, Lorena, my sister, Cindy, myself, my sister's son, Dean, and my other sister's new husband, Mark. And we carved our name in the tree, marking our place amongst the trees in our little grotto shrine out here past Mures. Just getting a shot of me for posterity out here past Mures in front of the tree that my dad carved when I was a newborn baby back in 1981. My dad, Davy, and down here, my name, Roger. So I'm going to head back down to the beach on my way back to Rauhala and bring this video to a closing here pretty quickly. But I'll probably shoot some shots along the way as I'm hiking the beach back to Rauhala. And here I am on the beach in front of Mures, and I'm looking down, way down there. If you were to keep carrying on down here, you would eventually get to Mitchell Bay, Impalati in Finnish, which means Virgin Bay. And that island over there, that little one, that's called Stubbs Island. And the Finnish name for that is Rusin Limpusaari, which means Russian Loaf Island, because it's shaped like a Russian loaf. And you're looking at the mountains of northern Vancouver Island into the sun, unfortunately, as I walk back towards Rauhala off in the distance there. You can see Mainel Point, Rauhala and Kallio. And let's go back to Rauhala. You're probably wondering why I have this thing on my nose. It's because it is kind of cold. It's cold air. It is winter. Even though it's nice and warm and cozy, it is still cold air and I get kind of stuffed up. And it helps me breathe, so I didn't want to have a stuffy breathing noises while I was making these videos for you. So that's why I'm wearing this little strip on my nose. And you'll probably, if you're from back east in Canada, be kind of angry at this comment. But in BC here, we tend to have nice winters like this. It's usually wet. Our winters are wet. So here in BC, we like to say it's a wet cold. And the rest of Canada is under freezing ice and snow. And we get this lovely wet cold weather out here in northern Vancouver Island region of BC. And it's a beautiful day. Looking off towards Rauhala, off in the distance. As I'm walking along here, getting closer to Rauhala, closer to where the old coal mining test borehole is. It usually doesn't happen in the wintertime. It's more in the summertime, but in the summertime, you'll see this bubbling that comes up. And again, I did make a video all about this, which I mentioned earlier in this video, about why that bubbling happens. And it's natural gas coming up from the coal vein that goes all the way from here all the way out to Suquash, where there was once a coal mine where the grade of the coal was greater than the grade of the coal out this way. Thankfully, that coal mining operation didn't happen, and Rauhala stayed as beautiful as Rauhala is in our modern day. There's another cool feature on the beach here, but I'm not going to show it to you, but I am going to talk about it. And the reason why I'm not going to show it to you is because it's something that could easily get taken away and walked away with if someone knows exactly what they're looking for or where to find it. But I do show that off on my tours when I take people out on tours out this way. And what it is this rock that's been shaped by someone a long time ago with a chisel. And there's this neat shape that pops out of the rock. You can see the chisel marks and the size of the chisel that was used to carve this rock. And yeah, it's this neat little feature. I have to be careful as I'm walking here not to slip on these round rocks on the beach. But yeah, I just want to at least mention it. You're hiking the beaches, especially in more remote parts of Malkosaari, Malcolm Island, you'll tend to find some things, interesting things that wash up on the beach, especially in the winter here. And I'm walking up to something right now that caught my eye, and it looks like it's a giant float of some sort off of something, maybe a fish farm, part of an old fish farm. I'm not sure what this is. It's a float though, off of a dock. It's quite large. Perhaps a bumper. It's interesting nonetheless. One of the more common shells you'll find washed up on the beaches out past Rauhala are these giant barnacles. And they grow out in the kelp patches just off of the beach here, in a little bit deeper waters. And they usually, kelp grows the roots and gets caught on the barnacles and pulls them off the rocks, and they'll wash ashore. On this part of Malkosaari, Malcolm Island is on the southern shores facing Vancouver Island. You'll see all these washed up logs on the beach, and this goes way back to the 20s and 30s and 40s, when all the log tows and all the logging that was going on in the area. Log tows would go through here, which are like bundles of logs being towed by tugboats, and some of those logs would break off and wash up on the beaches. My dad, when he grew up, he was born in 1928, and when he grew up in Sointula as a little kid, he said there were no logs on the beaches, and the logs eventually started piling up and washing up on the beaches, and as you can see today, they're all over the place. Now, if you were going on the northern shores of Malkosaari, Malcolm Island, called Soranta, on the north shore of Malcolm Island, you'll see what the original beaches once looked like, and they were not full of logs. All right, luckily I came across some of the natural gas bubbling up, as you can see here. You can see it coming up through the rocks, and you could hear another one somewhere over here. And that's natural gas coming up from that coal vein. And you'll see on the beaches here, you'll see signs of the old logging camp. Pieces of metal on the beach here and there. And again, more of that natural gas bubbling up. All right, I'm approaching Rauhala here, so I'm going to veer off back up into our fields and take off back into town. So that's going to conclude this video, this little tour of out to Mures, past Rauhala here. In behind me, you can see Rauhala, the bay piece, as I'm going back to Rauhala. So if you want to get in touch and come along on one of my history tours, get in touch through YouTube or Facebook. If you're up in the area and want to come on one of my tours, get in touch with me. And if you want to follow along my video series and learn about this site and other sites that I'm going to take you to, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. All right, ciao.
The Malcolm Islander where the waters gleam, mountains rise like a distant dream. He walks where the forest keeps its slow. The Malcolm Islander forever exploring